Chapter 4. Do I have to pay support for a child that is not my biological child? The issue of having to pay support for a child that isn't your own biological child can affect you in several ways, depending on the situation. First and foremost, you must understand this important point. You don't have to be the biological father for a court to order you to pay child support. In California, if you're the presumed father, the responsibility of child support is already yours. I know this strikes many people as odd, and some will disagree, but it's true. Still, in most cases, paternity must be established before any child support case can be established in court. In other cases, child support is established due to a person being the presumed parent of a minor child. This can happen in one of two ways. If the parent were not married during the time the child was conceived, a person can still be perceived as a child's parent and found to be financially responsible by default judgment. If the parents were married during the time the child was conceived, then in certain situations, one can be considered the presumed father after 2 years. As I mentioned before, paying support for a child that is not your biological child may strike many people as unfair, but sometimes it's the right thing to do. For instance, if the presumed father acted in the capacity of a father and was in that role with the child during the time the parents were together, then it may be appropriate that he continue and provide child support for that child. In other cases, it's outright wrong. For example, if the presumed father fails to respond back to a court summons due to circumstances beyond his control, and that's why he is found to be the father by default. Believe me, this happens often. Regardless of the reasons, people often have to pay support even when a kid isn't their own biological child. Sometimes you might be able to avoid this issue. Timing, persistence, and fortitude are the keys to success in this matter. I'll give you a couple of scenarios to help illustrate better. Before I begin, I want to let you know that each scenario here is from an actual case that I've handled in the past. In other words, these situations do happen. You may know someone going through the same thing right now, or you may be going through a similar situation yourself. Typical scenario for unmarried parents. Stanley and Gloria have a 1-month-old baby boy. Stanley stays with his mother in Santa Monica, California, while Gloria resides with her grandmother in Torrance. Stanley is a cross-country truck driver, and he's on the road for 22 days of each month. Gloria is a retail clerk at a local mall. After 6 months together, the parents split when Stanley finds out that Gloria has been meeting with her high school boyfriend, Kenny. Gloria and Stanley mutually agree to share custody, and they set a visitation schedule for the baby without going to court. It's only a verbal agreement, there's nothing in writing. In addition, the parents also agree that Stanley will pay Gloria $250 per month for child support. These arrangements work well for about 3 months, but in the 4th month, Stanley falls short on his child support, giving Gloria only $150. Gloria is upset. She tells Stanley that if he can't pay the agreed-upon amount, then she will go to court and get an order for child support. Stanley tries to reason with her, but Gloria disregards him and ends the conversation. The process starts. The next day, Gloria goes to the local Department of Child Support Services, DCSS, and completes an application for child support. About 45 days after she went to DCSS, Stanley is served a summons from the court. Included is a copy of a form regarding paternity as well as other pertinent forms, a blank response and answer to the petition. On the form, Stanley sees the proposed amount of child support is $925. In shock, Stanley drops the paperwork. He can't believe what he's reading. He thinks that the court assumes he earns far more income than he actually does. Stanley also sees the amount of income reported by Gloria is incorrect as well. It's far too low. In addition, the shared visitation schedule is also incorrect. What the heck is going on? He wonders. So he calls Joey, his buddy who knows nothing about the child support process, but he has 3 open child support cases and is delinquent with hefty arrears in all of them. Stanley tells his buddy about the paperwork and asks for his advice. Joey recommends that he should talk with Gloria, pay her directly, and just forget about the court paperwork. Stanley explains to his buddy that he and Gloria had initially arranged for him to pay her directly. However, just because he was short once, Gloria decided to go through the DCSS. His buddy listens, then makes a suggestion. He tells Stanley to figure it out and do everything possible to avoid the DCSS. Joey tells Stanley that once he gets a child support order, his life will belong to the government. Joey jokingly says to Stanley that once child support starts taking his money, it's best to not earn any money at all. Stanley tosses the court paperwork in his truck glove compartment, then goes on as though he never received any paperwork from the court. He resumes sending child support money to Gloria for their baby, and he continues visiting as they had previously agreed. Gloria doesn't mention her filing for child support, and neither does Stanley. The question of paternity. One day, while Stanley is leaving Gloria's house after picking up the baby for a visit, he is approached by Gloria's boyfriend, Kenny. Kenny tells Stanley that he thinks he may be the true father of the baby, not Stanley. Gloria tells Kenny to stop lying and to be quiet. Stanley is stunned, but he doesn't react. Gloria grabs Kenny and pushes him away from Stanley's car. Gloria tells Stanley to leave, and she pushes Kenny back into the house. Stanley hesitates for a moment, then leaves with the baby. When Stanley gets home, he speaks with his mother about what Kenny said to him while picking up his child. Mom suggests that he look into getting a DNA test. Stanley laughs it off. As of now, Stanley has allowed 65 days to pass without action since he was served the paperwork from the court. That paperwork is still in his car's glove compartment. He hasn't touched those documents since he first put them there after talking to his friend Joey. One day while he's traveling for his work, Stanley gets a call from his employer. She tells him that the payroll will begin deducting a certain amount from his paycheck each week because they received a wage assignment from the DCSS. Stanley is in disbelief, but then he remembers the paperwork he left in the glove compartment and nods his head. He tells his employer to do whatever she has to do to comply with the wage assignment and that he'll contact the child support agency when he returns to town. When Stanley returns home after being on the road for several days, he first goes to pick up his child for a visit. As he approaches the front door of Gloria's home, Kenny runs out and quickly closes the door behind himself. He and Stanley don't say anything to each other, but their eyes meet. It's an awkward moment. Kenny lowers his head and walks away quickly. Stanley knocks on the door, and Gloria lets him in. Stanley sits on the couch while Gloria gets the baby ready to leave with him. While he's waiting, Stanley looks around the house and notices several pictures of his baby together with Kenny. This worries Stanley a little, but he doesn't say anything to Gloria. When Gloria brings the baby into the room, Stanley takes him and immediately leaves her house. On Stanley's way home with the baby, he happens to get a call from his friend Joey. Stanley tells Joey that he's angry because Kenny spends so much time with his baby, and Kenny has taken more pictures with his son than Stanley has. Stanley also mentions the conversation when Kenny had claimed the baby as his own. Joey jokingly tells Stanley to go to his local drugstore and buy an over-the-counter DNA test. Stanley laughs, and they get off the phone. Stanley thinks about what Joey said and also about what his mother said. Stanley goes to the drugstore and buys a DNA test kit. He's curious about whether he is truly the father of the baby. After dinner that evening, Stanley takes out the DNA test kit. He follows the instructions for administering and mailing in the test. A couple of weeks later, Stanley receives an email with the result of the DNA test. The result shows there is a 99.4% chance that Stanley is not the biological father of his baby boy. He's stunned, and he immediately calls Gloria to tell her the news. Gloria and Stanley argue. He blames her for cheating, and he's absolutely shocked that the baby isn't his child. Gloria denies the result and doubts whether Stanley actually took the DNA test. Stanley is upset, but he doesn't want to believe the results either. Checking the information included with the DNA test kit, he notices that the results aren't certified, so he makes the gut decision to seek answers. Gloria continues to insist that the baby is his child. On payday, Stanley receives his check. He's in a hurry on his way to pick up the baby for a visit, so he doesn't open the check envelope until he gets into his car. When Stanley finally looks at his paycheck, he sees his net pay is reduced because of a deduction for his child support enforcement order. Looking more closely, Stanley notices that child support is the highest deduction from his check except for federal and state income taxes. Stanley is very upset. As he drives to Gloria's house to pick up the baby, Stanley starts thinking like this. This baby might not even be my own child. I'm here paying support for someone else's kid. He quickly redirects his thinking elsewhere. When he arrives at Gloria's house, she isn't home, but Stanley is greeted by her boyfriend, Kenny. He invites Stanley inside to wait while he prepares the baby's bags to leave for the visit. While Stanley is sitting in the living room, he sees those pictures of the baby and Kenny together, and it irritates him again. While he's waiting, Stanley makes a note to himself to call child support on Monday to let them know that he is not the father of Gloria's baby. Soon, Kenny comes out of the bedroom with the baby and his bags. Stanley and the baby leave Gloria's house and enjoy their visit together. On Monday, Stanley calls the California Child Support Department at 866-901-3212. He speaks with a customer service representative, CSR. He starts to tell the CSR that he has a child support order regarding a child that he used to think was his, but from an over-the-counter, non-certified DNA test, he now believes that he might not be the father. The CSR takes notes related to Stanley's statements. She tells him that she will send his message to the caseworker, who should respond within 48 hours. After Stanley gets off the phone with the CSR, he calls Gloria. He lets her know that he contacted Child Support Services to tell them he's not the child's father and that they must stop taking money from his paycheck. Gloria blows her top. She screams at Stanley and tells him that he's stupid for thinking that the baby was not his child. She goes on to say that during their time together, he was the only man in her life. She also says the baby looks just like Stanley. He tells her that his DNA test confirms he's not the father. Gloria and Stanley argue for a while. Then Stanley says he needs to get off the phone and return to work. Gloria replies that she'll let him go, but since he thinks their baby isn't really his, she won't allow Stanley to see him anymore. Stanley goes back to work. A couple of days later, Stanley gets a call from a child support officer, CSO, at DCSS. The CSO tells Stanley that she got a message stating he was contesting the paternity of the baby. She tells Stanley that according to DCSS records, he is the presumed father. The CSO goes on to say that he was served a summons prior to the child support order being established. The CSO reminds Stanley that he had 30 days to respond back to the court, but he failed to do so. In addition, the child support order has already been established and enforced, and some payments were made. The CSO asks Stanley why, if he wanted to contest the paternity, didn't he file a response to the summons? Stanley tells the CSO that he didn't respond because he didn't know he had to. He tells her that he recently discovered that the baby wasn't his through a DNA test. The child support officer asks Stanley if the paternity test was certified. Stanley says no. The CSO points out that even if the test were certified, it wouldn't matter. Stanley is still the presumed father of the baby, according to the state of California. Since Stanley is the presumed father and the court has no other records that state otherwise, the agency has an order for child support and they'll continue to enforce it until the judgment is modified or that order is terminated. Stanley is once again shocked at the news he is hearing about his child support situation. He asks the CSO what could be done to modify or terminate the child support order. She tells Stanley that she can't give legal advice, and he'll need to contact an attorney for help. The CSO hears the confusion in his voice. She offers to help Stanley by emailing him a copy of the summons and also a copy of the default judgment, including the child support amount presently being enforced. They conclude the call, and moments later he receives her email message. As usual, Stanley goes right back to work. The next day, Stanley takes a day off work and visits an attorney to see about modifying or terminating the child support order. He consults with a local seasoned family law attorney. After listening to Stanley's explanation about what happened, the attorney advises him about several things he can do. The attorney recommends that he prepare the response, then file a motion to set aside the court's default judgment, supported by points and authorities, together with a written declaration to fully explain what happened. He suggests that Stanley respond to the original petition and in his response seek an order for a DNA test with certifiable results that would be acceptable to the court. The attorney also points out that Stanley is still within the 180-day time period when a judge has the discretion to simply set aside the default judgment and give him a chance to respond to the original petition. Now that I've outlined an example of unmarried parents, let's look at the scenario for a typical married couple. Typical scenario for married parents. Jasmine and Clifford. They're married and have 2 children together. Jasmine and Clifford have an open relationship. Jasmine becomes pregnant with their 3rd child, and she tells Clifford. Clifford is happy to hear the news, and they celebrate together. 9 months later, Jasmine and Clifford have a handsome baby boy. They're very excited and happy to welcome their new child. Many months go by. The boy's facial features begin to develop, and he looks much different from Clifford. Jasmine and Clifford have a long conversation, and she tells him that he might not be the father of this baby. The couple mutually agrees to get an over-the-counter paternity test from their local pharmacy. Several weeks after submitting the DNA test, the couple learns that Clifford is not the biological father of this child. Clifford feels hurt, but he's understanding. At this time, the couple decides that Clifford will indeed be considered the baby's father, regardless of paternity. Clifford promises Jasmine that he'll continue to treat the child as his very own son. Along with their other kids, Clifford continues fathering this child as if he were a blood offspring. 3 years go by. Jasmine begins cheating on Clifford again. They split due to Jasmine's infidelity. By chance, Clifford learns that the guy Jasmine is currently seeing is her same old boyfriend who is possibly the father of the child. Soon after their breakup, Jasmine files for a dissolution of the marriage, divorce. In her petition for dissolution, she requests child support for all 3 of their children. This disturbs Clifford because he doesn't want to pay support for their youngest child. He feels that if Jasmine files for divorce, then the baby is her sole responsibility, especially when she's seeing a man who might be the father of this particular child. Clifford wants to know his rights and financial obligations. He contacts a local family law attorney. Clifford tells the attorney the story of how he discovered his youngest kid isn't his biological child. After hearing the details about Clifford's situation, the attorney tells him that he is indeed liable and financially obligated to pay child support for the baby. She explains that he's considered the child's presumed father. Jasmine and Clifford were married at the time their youngest child was conceived. So after learning the child was not his biologically, Clifford had a full 2 years to contest. The attorney reminds Clifford that when Jasmine first informed him of the possibility their youngest son wasn't his, and he accepted the child as his own, the clock started ticking. Now that they've separated, Clifford can't just reject the child after treating him like a son for such a long time. Since Clifford didn't differentiate among his children, the youngest son presumes Clifford to be his father. Both of the example scenarios above offer a bit of insight into situations where you might be ordered to pay support for a child that isn't yours by blood. You'll notice that none of these scenarios include any discussion about the actual court proceedings. I did that for a good reason. Every individual case is different, and many things can go right or wrong when you go to court. Sure, case law and family code may work to your benefit, but still the judge might not see things your way. Anything is possible in court. That concludes Chapter 4. From the book Child Support Orders Matter, written by Xavier M. Marshall Sr., we hope that you found the information provided helpful. To receive more helpful information, subscribe to this channel. If you have any questions or comments, you can email us at maddadfam@gmail.com. That's maddadfam@gmail.com. To send a monetary contribution, you can Cash App us at $MakeItHappen007. That's $MakeItHappin007. Venmo at yourservice951. That's ATYOURSERVICE951. Or send a check or money order to 4192 Brockton Avenue, Suite 203, Riverside, California 92501.